Hi there, welcome. I'm Graham Fitch, the co-founder of the Online Academy and the author of the Practicing the Piano blog. And this is my February, I forgot what month it was for a minute, February practice clinic, in which I address questions sent in by subscribers to the Online Academy. So if you would like to become a member of the Online Academy, the details are in the description box below, or will be. And send in your questions. There's a protocol we go through. We need bar numbers, etc., so that I can easily find where it is what you're looking for. So I've got a few questions today, a variety of different repertoire. So I'm going to just jump straight in with Hans, who asks, this is about the Mendelssohn Albumblatt, the album leaf in E minor, which is Opus 117. Which is to be found often in the along with the songs without words. He asks, the left hand has quite a few stretchy figurations, indeed it does, which I find difficult to get smooth at speed, and then Hans has listed a few bar numbers, but he's also said the first 3 bars. Can you give me some tips as to how to practice these? Yes, I think I can. I've been having a little look at this. By the way, before I start, do please let me know where you're watching from, and do all the stuff that makes Facebook Live fun. Yeah, thank you. Somebody's just hit the like button. Frankie, yes, from Indonesia. Lovely to see you. And, you know, we quite like to see the heart buttons and all of those, you know, things that you can push and press and play around with on Facebook. So, Naoko is watching. That's lovely. So, let me start with the Mendelssohn. Now, the way this left hand works, it's very typical romantic piano background texture. You know, it's this kind of idea, and then we get a tune that comes in a little later. And then back to this. So I think the problem with this, Hans, is, well, the solution rather to the problem is flexibility in the left hand. Now, if we look at the opening, we've got an E minor chord spread out, and the fingering that is probably the best fingering, it's the universal fingering, if there is such a thing, would be 5, 3, 2, 1. Now, obviously, there's no way one can lock the hand and fix it into that position. Prithvi, nice to see you. Orlando, that's a nice smiley face, great. So there's no way that we would even want to, even if we could manage that stretch, there's no way that we would want to keep the hand fixed. So let's look and see how that might work. If I put my 3rd finger down first and used it as a pivot to get from the pinky part of the hand to the top part of the hand, you'll notice when I play my pinky, my arm is aligned behind the pinky. In other words, there's a straight line behind from my arm to my pinky, which is what we're looking for. We want to avoid this kind of stretch, this twist in the wrist, because that's going to cause tension problems, and then if you keep doing it, it's going to cause injury problems. So what we're doing by pivoting around is basically aligning the arm behind the playing fingers, using the 3rd finger as a pivot. So let me now show you what you might do to practice. If you play the 5 and the 3 together, now the next chord comes up a couple of bars later, the pivot note moves. Now that is a stretch, I grant you that, but that's not, I was going to say it is avoidable. I'm going to show you a few ideas, but let me go on. See, I've gone through those positions now. The pivot finger sometimes changes from a B to a C, and the upper notes change as the harmony shifts around. Now, there are a couple of other things you can do to practice this. Let me just show you that first. So I've shown you playing the top 2 notes together. That's very helpful. When we get to bar 8, we get an issue. We can no longer connect the bass to the first note of the chord. So we've got a couple of choices. We either jump from a 5 to a 3, and then similarly in this bar. Now there are a couple of benefits to that. If we make the bass note just a little firmer and a little fatter, and a tiny bit longer, that buys us a little time to get from here to there. So in other words, it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's a little space between there. See how that might work. Now, I have been exploring some other fingering possibilities, and there are a couple. Not ideal, but for a small hand who wants to play this piece, you could explore these thoughts. So the first obvious alternative is to come over with the second finger, 2. It works reasonably well. I find that that's slowing me down. Now when I get to bar 5, it becomes increasingly awkward with the thumb on the black key. And that doesn't feel good either. Bar 6 doesn't feel good with that fingering. So here's a couple of alternatives. So supposing you were to do 5, 1, 3, 2. That would be worth exploring. So fingering again, 5, 1. Okay, we've got Diana from Epsom. That's kind of close by. Nice to see you, Diana. So yeah, 5, 1, 3, 2. And that works pretty much for all of them, the idea of that fingering, but you might need to go to a 4 here, 4, 2. Now if we go on a little bit later, bar 5, I had a couple of other thoughts. 5, 2, 1, 2, yes, we've already been through that. But if we look now at bar 8, 5, 1, 4, 2. So that avoids the stretch, but we need to be able to get from the thumb to the 4. And I find that the most, the neatest way of getting from 1 to 4 is not to lift the hand, but to rotate across the thumb. So it would look like this, 5, 1, 4. Do you see how I get from thumb to 4? Rotate across, so that I really don't have to lift away from my keyboard. That's a very distinct possibility for both bars. Well, for bar 8, I think I would probably end up wanting to do that myself. Bar 9, I would, again, you could do 5, 1, 5, 2. So I think a lot of this has to do with the solution to your problem, Hans, has to do with finding a fingering that suits your hand by perhaps exploring a couple of other possibilities and making sure that you're very mobile in the arm. And the wrist, of course, has to be very flexible for this to work. So don't try and stretch positions, but rather move across through that comfortable loose wrist. I hope that gives you a few ideas. And of course you can use some rhythm practice as well. Rhythm practice can be very helpful if you stop on the top note. And the bottom note. I feel myself swinging from the bass to the top and then back down again. Keeps me very free. But not an easy piece for a small hand. Moving on. Orlando asks about Billy Mayall's Marigold. This is Orlando's question. Would it be possible to advise on how to play and practice these tremolos? This is bars 29 to 31. I've listened to Mayall's own recording, also slowed down, and he seems to play them exactly as written, with the 4 grace notes on the last quaver, that's an 8th note of the preceding bar. I try and keep a loose wrist and arm and a rotary action, but it sounds terrible and ruins the whole piece. Well, knowing you're playing, Orlando, I doubt that it sounds terrible at all. But it is a tricky little spot, and I'm going to show you. But before I do that, I want to just give you one suggestion for this, which I find very helpful myself if I'm wanting to research performances. And that is to go onto YouTube and find a performance. It's either video or audio, it doesn't matter, but slow it down. Use the little settings cog and click on that and you'll see speeds, playback speeds. So you can either play back at the original speed, obviously, or you can play a quarter fast. In other words, twice as fast, a quarter as fast, or three quarters as fast, and the same with slow. So if you want, you can listen to it at half the speed or even a quarter of the speed, and while the sound quality is atrocious, you will be able to hear all sorts of details that go by too quickly to ascertain at the normal speed. So that's one suggestion. And I did actually listen to see what people did. And I found that the most successful performances were where the tremolo was measured rhythmically. And I'll get to that in a minute, but before I get to it, I just have to show you this. I found this in a junk shop somewhere, I forget when, and I thought the cover was just so beautiful I had to buy it. It cost nothing. And it's probably one of the earliest versions of this. It cost 2 shillings. Copyright 1927, so it's been around a little bit. So I think just to address Orlando's question, the first thing I would suggest doing with this is, I mean, the temptation is to go straight to the tremolos, you know, here. And look at how the tremolos are working, but I would first be able to play my left hand really fluently, and it's always good to do a little bit of maintenance practice on that left hand just to keep it really in top condition. And a couple of things I would do. I mean, I can stretch the 10th. If your hand won't, you'll have to break it like that. But for practice, let me break it for now, just because I think a lot of people wouldn't be able to stretch that. Do you see how the release of this chord took me immediately to the surface of the next position? So I'm covering 5 and 2 when I go down. I'm not covering the thumb because I want to move this way to get to the thumb, but I'm making sure 5 and 2 are anchored. See how fast that movement was? And the next thing you could do, the next thing you could do would be to make sure you can go quickly from that to that and land. And then land back. Land back. I call this a cercatura practice for any jump. It's very useful for a jump. You treat the note before the jump as an cercatura, you leap off it and land onto the chord that follows, or the hand position that follows, making sure that the wrist is free. And just to check that the wrist is free, if you really want to check, you can do a little wobble from side to side. Now this wobble, of course, doesn't affect the sound one bit, but what it does do is to give you the opportunity just to check in with your wrist to make sure after a while you won't need it. And then I make another jump from here back to that. Do you see? So that's really direct. And if you're finding that that's inaccurate for whatever reason, you can jump to a selected note of the next chord, let's say the bottom note, and then touch in the upper notes afterwards. Let's now go to the middle note of the chord. And so on. You're getting the idea. And then perhaps to the top note. About the outer 2 notes, and then fill in the middle note after. See, all of these things are really good practice for this, because what we want to do is to make sure that the left hand is fantastic, so we don't have to worry about what the left hand's actually doing when we're performing it. If we've got any worry about is my left hand going to manage that chord, that's going to affect anything that happens in the right hand. So if we've got a fantastic left hand, it can be automated, and we can just then rely on it to do its job without our conscious thought. So to get on to what the right hand has to do, well, I was looking at this. This is not a piece that I've played, although having looked at it for a little bit, I'm falling really in love with it. I think it's a fantastic thing to play. It would make a great encore. So we've got this group of 4, which has to link to the next position. Do you see what I'm doing there? I'm practicing first, getting from the end of this, 2, 3, again springing out. First of all, just to the first two notes of the tremolo, so that I'm really secure. What am I doing there? That's right. Get the idea there. So that would be another thing I would do for practice, to make sure that's really, really solid, that landing. And then the next stage would be to land on the whole chord. And again, just check that that wrist is free. F major chord. I noticed there was a little tension in my wrist there. Let me do that better. That's better. And again, you can use your selected landing practice for this as well. Let me go to the second finger and drop the rest of the hand position in afterwards. Let me try that with the next to one to the top. It's a fourth finger. Well, that's very good practice, because if you look at what happens here, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So the fourth finger has to jump from the G to the E flat. That's if you're using the fourth finger on the E flat. I think probably my hand would want a third finger on the E flat, but a fourth finger everywhere else, just because of the black-white position. I've got here a major third, black to white, so I prefer a 3 there, but of course you could use a 4. But do you see what happens? I've got to be able to spring from my fourth finger here to that finger, which in these instances now is all 4 to 4, 4, 4. So I've really got to be able to get there quickly. So that would be the next thing to practice, and then similarly, and then touch in the remaining notes afterwards. You can do that with an octave. Get the idea. So that's again selective landing from the little gruppetto to the chord that we're eventually going to need to tremolo. Now let's look at the tremolo itself. We've got a pair of notes down here, up to another pair of notes up there. So let me see who's joining us. Inga, nice to see you, Inga. So let's see if we can just figure out how we rotate from one position to the other. It's from the forearm. The fingers are just there on the end of the arm. You see how that works mechanically? I've got a rotation of my forearm. So this is all rotating in one unit here, from here to here. The wrist is level and stable. Now if you find that you're not, and I'm not talking about Orlando specifically, but anybody who's looking at this piece, if you find that you're not coordinating that tremolo, maybe you find that you play the thumb and then 3 notes come together there. There's some things that you can do that would help you anchor that, and I would suggest, again, going from maybe the bottom note to the bottom note of the next position, if you see what I mean. So the lower note here to the lower note here, and maybe the middle note, and then, which one have I not done? And if you notice what I'm doing there, I'm doing that in triplet subdivisions, because that gives me an anchor, first of all on this note, and then on that note. So each pair of fingers gets each note in the pair of fingers gets a chance to be the boss, if you will. Now, a very good way of making that, increasing the tempo would be, again, just to do it first of all very slowly, and then increase the note value. So let's say you're starting this in quarters, that's crotchets, triplet quarters, until that movement is nice and free, and then 16ths, and then triplet 16ths, 30 seconds. Do you see how I'm doing that? I'm going up in increments of from slow to fast. You can of course use a metronome for this if that's helpful to you. Now when you come to put this all together, I discovered, looking at this a little bit, that I would want to again make the whole thing rhythmical. So if you're making subdivisions of the beats, put this on 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. inclination is to stop the tremolo on the second beat. That kind of idea. Now, that's sixes that I'm doing. If you find that sixes, if let's say you're taking a slightly more relaxed tempo and you find sixes not quite enough, do eights. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if you become aware where each note comes metrically within the hierarchy of the metrics of the bar, you'll find that you can practice it slowly with exactly the right coordination, in other words, rhythmically organized first. Now there are other ways of doing it. You could, if you wanted to, but that gives you very little time to get back down. And the recordings I listened to, I won't say who they were, one of them did sixes and the other one did 8. The one who did the 8 took a slightly more relaxed tempo, but both of them stopped the tremolo there on the second beat, at which point you'd probably want to lift your pedal and make a punctuation between the second beat and the next beat. So I hope that gives you some ideas for practice, Orlando, there. Barbara says, I'm teaching a little boy a Trinity grade 3 piece from the 2021-23, in other words, the new Trinity syllabus, and it's called Les Coucous Bénévoles by François Couperin. It's going very well and it's now up to speed, but the mordant in bar 8 is proving a stumbling block. We're doing the easier of the two possible options, which are listed at the bottom of the page, but even then it's proving a problem to play it fluently. There's little time to prepare for it, as the preceding note is a demi-semiquaver, and I've suggested he detaches that preceding note so that he has all three fingers free. 4, 3, 4. Sorry, 3, 4, 3 seemed to be the only option to play the ornament. Also, this is not the first time I've had difficulty helping younger pupils to be comfortable and confident with ornaments. Thank you. Yeah, Barbara, the first thing I would say about that is it's not a mordant, it's a trill. When you see this squiggly, the curvy line in Baroque music from this period, it's not a mordant, it's a trill. The term mordant applies to the, if I take, let's say, the D that you're talking about, the trill would be 4-note. Officially, if it weren't a grade 3 piece, I'd say you kind of got to do the 4-note job, which is, there's the note of the trill from the upper note. What the editor here is suggesting, and it's actually a sensible suggestion for a younger player, is to do this, which came later to be called an upper mordant. The actual mordant, it would be the note itself followed by the note below, and then the note itself, the main note again. There is a lot of confusion about ornamentation because as music evolved, piano music evolved, keyboard music evolved from the harpsichord to the fortepiano to the piano, the characteristics of the instruments are very different, and it became the norm as the piano got bigger and more resonant to start the trills and the ornaments from the main note rather than from the note above. But when we're playing music from this period, ideally we'd want to do from the upper note. Now, before I get to that specific point, I'd just like to recommend a book that, if you want a very direct, easy to read, easy to follow book on ornamentation, this is an Alfred publication. I find Alfred publications excellent because they're very clear, and they've usually got in the editions a very good, clear preface that give you all the necessary information that you'd need stylistically. And in Baroque, in their Baroque scores, they even put the ornaments in little notes above the main text in grayscale to show you how they would be realized. So, and I can just very quickly show you inside. You've got pictures, you've got diagrams, you've got, it's very, very clear. If you wanted something a little bit more in-depth, you've got this Howard Ferguson book, which is, again, it's a classic. It's called Keyboard Interpretation from the 14th to the 19th century, Howard Ferguson. Just while I'm on the subject, I did drag a few books off. For classical period music, this is excellent. I don't know where I'd be without this. It's called Performance Practices in Classic Piano Music by Sandra P. Rosenblum. Really terrific. It's a scholarly book. And if you want another scholarly recommendation, I've got here by Clive Brown, this book, which is called Classical and Romantic Performing Practice, 1750 to 1900. But this is before 1750, this piece. So the idea here is Couperin actually wrote the trill with a break, these two notes to be connected together. So if I take this super slowly, my suggestion would be this. Escape at that point, so both hands come up. Now if you've escaped freely from the keyboard, you can land where you want. So the first thing I would do would be to land in my lap. If there's any tension on the release, when the hands release, you're going to carry that tension forwards into the next, into the trill, and you'll find that you're stymied from that. So that would be the first thing I do. Now, the trill itself, I would use this fingering, which is a very typical French fingering for this sort of pattern. This comes all over the shop in French Baroque music. Lift. So 3-2-3-2, lift. So there's no connection. Now, if you decide that it's easier to do the alternative, which is actually what later came to be called the upper mordant, instead of 3-2-3-2, just use 2-3-2. But you can still do the same thing. And then make that very stylish gap between the end of the trill and the pas d'armes figure that comes after. Now, it's not only young people that have problems with ornaments. I was doing tutoring on the Piano Teachers Course UK over the weekend, and I did a particular workshop on Baroque style. And you know, a lot of people are confused about not only how to realise the ornaments, hence my labouring the point with those books, but also how to play them technically. And I, over the years, have come up with a solution that works very well for me and works very well for my students, which is not to try and play them with my fingers like this. It seems the obvious thing, just keep the hand very loose and well, on the keyboard, and just operate the fingers like this. Now, on the harpsichord, that's how you would do it, because the harpsichord's a different mechanism, a different action. But I have found on the piano that if you think of that 4-note trill as a slur, like if I were to do this in slow motion, I would come from above the key. Let me do it from above the key first. And you'll notice hopefully you'll notice two things. One, it's one motion from the arm that takes in the 4 notes. Let's say I'm busy playing on my keyboard and I don't have a break before the trill, I can still use that mechanical approach. So did you notice there? I don't have to lift my hand necessarily. And the other thing I'm doing is walking to the back of the keyboard. So there's the sense of each time I play a note, I'm in a different spot on my keyboard, and that keeps me very free. So when I played my last note, there's no tension anywhere, and it's fast and easy and light. So that would be my suggestion. Now, okay, I'm also a great believer in inventing exercises from pieces. So rather than just practice that one thing over and over again, you could do something like this. That's a bit weird. See what I did? I just took that figure, memorized it so that I don't have to look at the page, and then just applied it to a scale, meaning that I've got how many, let's say 8 different opportunities to experience that same pattern of movement, but on different notes, on a different black-white pattern. So that hopefully that will help you there, Barbara, or help your pupil anyway. Moving to the last question from Gabby. Gabby says, I'm really struggling with a section from Ginastera's, excuse my pronunciation, Danza de la Moza Donosa, from Danzas Argentinas by Ginastera. Oh, I said that, didn't I? It's the part where the right hand has all the strange chords from bar 42. I can never seem to get on top of this part. The chords confuse me, and my right ends up, I think you mean right hand, yeah, okay, right hand ends up being really tense after just a couple of bars. Thank you for your help. Okay, well, let's hope I can help. I'm just welcoming Dana, who's watching, and anybody who heard my awful pronunciation there, you can correct me in the comments below. Okay. Diana, any chance of having details of the resources you mentioned after you finish the session, please? Yeah, what will happen, Diana, is that this video will go onto YouTube, and it will also be on the Facebook page. So if you want to, you know, go through the video and just freeze the frame when you see the information. But I'm sure we can supply you with the details of those publications. So let's get to the spot. This is the danza. This is the beginning, and a lovely cantando line. Very atmospheric piece. And the section that Gabby's talking about is here. And so on. Lots of things to say about it. The first thing to say is it's only marked forte. The fortissimo comes later in bar 51. And actually we've got quite a nice range of dynamics here, from a pianissimo through to a mezzo forte to a piano, I'm sure, somewhere, although I can't see the piano, and forte. So just first of all, don't go too crazy with the sound. The other thing is, if the left hand is too strong for the right hand is going to have to work much harder than it needs to. So again, notice that I'm starting with the other hand. I often find that if somebody presents a problem and they say it's in my right hand, I'll look first at the left hand. If they say it's in the left hand, I'll look first at the right hand. Because we want to make sure that the left hand is giving the best possible support. So now, in order for the overtones of that bass to develop and bloom and blossom, I don't want to bang the notes that come above it. If I were to do this, I'm emphasizing the middle of the texture. I don't want the middle of the texture, I want the bottom of the texture. So I make sure that when I've got to the end of the bar that I'm hearing the blossom there. Lynn, I think I did on my grade 7. Lynn says, okay, yeah. I think it was set for an exam at some point. So you notice what I do there? I make a kind of diminuendo as I go up. Rather than, which is too noisy. I think there's often this feeling of when we see loud dynamics that it implies that every single note is loud. Far from it. If I talk really loudly, you'll find that there are some syllables or parts of words that are actually very soft. So it's the same when we see forte dynamics here. Forte for the bass and certainly for the top, but not for all of the padding material. And again, let's look at the right hand. So what I discover is I've got octaves with some rather interesting insides to them, and I want a little bit more top. Again, I don't want to kill my sound by banging from the lower part of my hand. So I'd really want more top. Now what I would would do first would be just to practice the pinky by itself. Firmly. Whoops. G sharp. And again, you'll notice that my arm is behind my pinky, so I'm lining up. There's a straight line. And again, shape it. It's not all equally loud there. I want that important. Time. Intonation between not pa 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 but each other. There's a little bit of space there. The other thing I would do would be to play my thumb line by itself, possibly against the left hand, but very lightly. See what I'm doing there? When we've got loud music, most of the practice is best done softly. Why? Well, a couple of reasons. One, the louder we play, the more we insist on the vertical events that we have to, in other words, putting the key down. When I play softly, I can more concentrate on the horizontal, which is how piano playing feels at its best anyway, especially in lines, like this is a musical line. So I would absolutely not practice this thing loudly. So did you notice what I did there? A little faster than my tempo. So I'm definitely feeling when I get to here that there's a new grouping from and that finishes end of phrase, and then do you get the sense what I'm trying to aim for there is a line that is shaped horizontally, vocally, rather than bang, bang, bang down. Now, okay, other things for practice. So we already talked about taking the pinky by itself with that sense of alignment. And as I'm doing this, I'm checking that my thumb stays loose. There's no point tightening up the hand. Well, we don't want to tighten up the hand. So the pinky is firm, but the thumb is loose. So put some attention onto the thumb and use good sound. Always go for good sound. Now, when we come to put the other notes in there, it's often very helpful to deconstruct chords like this. So we might play the octave first and then allow the middle fingers to come afterwards. Now I've got this expression I use, PPR, personalized pattern recognition, which is basically analysis, but it's a friendly type of analysis. It's whatever we notice about what we're playing, whatever patterns we notice about what we're playing. So I noticed there that the middle fingers are playing whole tones, whole steps. So there would be great value, and again, not heavy. There'd be great value in doing that. There would also be great value in taking an individual finger and just tracing it through. Let me take my second finger. I meant to say here that the intervals change to half step, semitones. Whole step there, and it comes back to tones. In the UK we say tones and semitones. I know elsewhere in the world you talk about whole steps and half steps. So again, if I hadn't noticed that, I'm missing something. I feel that I'm missing something. Now, what about this? Supposing I were to play, and again there's so many combinations, but let's say I were to play 1, 3, 2, 5. Now, I think what's really important after we do any of this, when we're doing any of this type of work, is to stop after each chord and just check the wrist, because we do not want any build-up of tension in the wrist. So, check, check. Literally, have a checklist. After each, just stop for a moment and just check in with your body. Now, I did 1, 3, 2, 5, but I might do 5, 3, 2, 1. I might do. What else have I not done? This is a good thing to do. Or there are loads of possibilities for layering it up. Supposing I were to take just 1 and 2. So just to sum up, do not practice this loudly. Do most of your practice at a softer dynamic. Make sure that you really sculpt your left hand so that that does not obtrude. Bass notes important, the other notes perhaps with a little sense of diminuendo. And then deconstruct the right hand 1 note at a time, and then in pairs of notes, and then do some exercises along the lines that I've suggested. And if you do these steps, take these steps daily for a little bit, don't just do them once, do them a few days. And this is the craftsman-like approach to practice that I learned from my teachers. It's not a question of waving a magic wand and saying do this with your wrist or do this here. It's what you do in your practice that counts. And it's not the amount of practice that you do, it's the quality of it, the attention that you can bring. So if you're practicing and your mind is somewhere else, you're effectively wasting time. Yeah, I hope, Gabby, that's addressed your question, and of course it applies to any other place where you've got chord streams. So it was great to be with you. Thank you very much for your lovely comments here. I'll read them afterwards. And I will look forward to seeing you next month for the March Practice Clinic. And don't forget that there are lots of workshops I'm doing online on Zoom, including one at 1:30 this afternoon. So if you want to learn how to approach learning new pieces from scratch, 1:30 GMT, that's London time, join me. Otherwise, I'll see you next month. Bye for now.